We'll begin here in just a second. We'll begin here in just a second. Maybe. Test 1, 2, 3. We'll begin here in just a... Okay, I think that's good to go. Turn off the live chat. Let me go over here to webcast. All right, we're about the only one left broadcasting. See how we sound. Test 1, 2, 3. Don't know why it's not playing. Only one. Okay, there we go. Left broadcasting. All right, yeah, we have one other. There's one other person broadcasting. I'm assuming it's about. Oh, it's a funeral. So it's a funeral. And while the funeral is happening, it should be probably wrapping up soon. So I may give it a few minutes here. I'm going to check my sound settings to make sure they are good to go. And yeah, we're going to do this today. Hopefully this will be beneficial. Florida. Someone from Florida has tuned in. That's rare for our live broadcast. Usually it's North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Those are the areas that almost always tune in for a live broadcast. Florida, is this the first time Florida has ever tuned in for a live broadcast? Maybe it's the first time I've seen it or recognized it. So welcome. If you're new here, well, you probably won't listen after this episode. So that's it depends on your, I don't know, what you're looking for, right? So if you tuned in and you saw the metadata, then it may tell me you have some historical knowledge of what I'm going to be talking about. Or maybe you just saw the word haunting and thought, ooh, is it? This may not be what you were thinking, all right? Maybe it is. I don't know. All right. I think we're good to go. I'll give it just a couple of more seconds and we'll get started officially. This is what we call the pre-show, where I just check the audio, make sure everything's good, give people a chance. The notification is sent out for those using the Church One app. So I let them get the notification and go, not listening to that today or whatever. And then I let people hopefully discover us on the Sermon Audio platform. They see the webcast and they see the Theology Central. Right there should just get their attention, right? Then they look at the title and they're like, nah. Who knows? I know it is Reformation Day, but we're going to go a different direction this time. All right. I think we're good to go. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. I got all of my notes ready to go. I spent a lot of time putting this together, so I hope it goes well. All right. Are you ready? Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Welcome, everyone. It is Friday, October the 31st, 2025. It is currently 11:36 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, if you've been paying any attention to this podcast, you know that I have done a lot of work in my series on the Salem witch trials. You know, the Salem witch trials have a strong impact on me. And every time I visit Salem, I have a very, 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 very strong connection with Salem. I can't explain it. There's an emotion I get when I pull into Salem. And whenever I walk around Salem, I feel so many different things. I love Salem. If I could, I would move there and get a job as a tour guide in one of the museums or one of the walking tour guides in some of the walking tours they have in Salem. But I felt today, being October the 31st, yes, we could talk about the Reformation, and we've talked about that frequently. And obviously, this is a theology-focused podcast, so we talk about that. But I also like to take time to go back and visit Salem. I like to take you on a road trip. So we're going to take a road trip to Salem. But because it's October the 31st, if you've ever been to Salem, you know today there are probably hundreds of thousands of people in Salem today for Halloween celebration, and the city is packed. I mean, literally shoulder to shoulder. It's impossible to even probably try to move around. I can't even imagine walking the streets of Salem right now. If you can look for video of Salem today, you will see it is crazy. So we're gonna take a road trip, but we're gonna stop a little before we get to Salem, and we're gonna stop somewhere that was of great significance during the time of the Salem witch trials. And I'm going to do this in my typical kind of dramatized version. Of course, I don't have all of the money to do the production with, everything. It's just going to be my voice, but I'm going to try to tell this story in a way that will capture the emotion, hopefully be as historically accurate as possible. There were so many different ways I wanted to go today with this. I could literally I could do like a Salem marathon today and tell story after story about Salem, because I know all of the stories about Salem and I study them and read them all the time. So this one I think is important to hear, and maybe it's important today. And so I hope you're ready. So are you ready to get in a car with me? We're going to drive towards Salem, and we're not going to make it quite to Salem. All right. So are you ready to take a road trip with me? All right. I wanted to do this episode at night, but trying to do this on Halloween night, I doubt anyone would even be listening. So maybe I'll do a Salem episode this evening anyway. Maybe I'll do one later tonight. Who knows? But this one I thought was good to go. So are you ready? Here we go. It's just past sunset. When we pull off the road in Danvers, Massachusetts. Now, if you ever drive from Boston to Salem, you typically will see the exit sign for Danvers. And well, if you're ever going to go visit Salem, take time to stop in Danvers, okay? A lot of people don't understand the historical significance of Danvers, but obviously I'm the one driving the car. You've got the best tour guide you could find for a trip to Salem. So it's just past sunset. I'm pulling off the road. We're in Danvers, Massachusetts. We're in a place that in 1692 was called Salem Village. The air carries that kind of autumn smell of pine needles and damp earth. The light has gone thin and orange. And before us stands the Rebecca Nurse Homestead. The Rebecca Nurse Homestead. It's a low, weathered house framed by a stone wall, and there's acres of quiet fields around us. The place feels very peaceful. In fact, if you don't know anything about Salem or the witch trials, you just may go, "Oh, this is a beautiful place." And because it's, the sun is setting, you may even want to sit down and take some photographs or start drawing a picture of just how beautiful it would all feel, and it may feel very peaceful to you. But for me, I don't feel that sense of peace. I don't feel any tranquility. I feel tormented. I feel emotional standing at the Rebecca Nurse homestead in Danvers. Because I remember and I know in great detail what happened. What happened to Rebecca Nurse. You see, Rebecca Nurse was a 71-year-old when her neighbors decided to call her a witch. She was 71 years of age when her neighbors decided, "You're a witch." She was a grandmother. She was a midwife. She was a member of the Puritan church in very good standing. And here in this, we'll refer to it as a garden, among the trees, this is where her story begins. So listen to the rustling leaves. Look the sun beginning to set. And let me introduce you to Rebecca. Rebecca Nurse, born around 1621 in England and came to the Massachusetts Bay Colony with her Puritan family. She married Francis Nurse, raised 8 children, and for decades she was admired for her piety and her gentle spirit. She was seen as a godly woman. But by the spring of 1692, Salem village was falling apart, being torn apart. Famine, fear, war, and theological despair all was pressing down. People began to whisper of witches walking among the people. Witches possibly sitting in the pew of the church. And at that moment, even the most godly, they were not safe. On March the 24th, 1692, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Rebecca Nurse. The same community that had once honored her holiness now gathered to see, did she sign the devil's book? At first, even the afflicted girls hesitated. One cried out that she could never accuse goodly Nurse, for she is a saintly woman. But the pressure continued to mount. When the name of Rebecca Nurse was mentioned, the afflicted would seize with fits. She herself, being examined, answered in a trembling voice that she was innocent and she knew nothing of the devil. She was hard of hearing. The magistrates somehow interpreted her silence as guilt. Ministers urged her to confess, saying that it might save her soul, but she would not confess to a lie. June the 29th, 1692, the courthouse in Salem town. Now we've moved from Danvers, Salem village, to now Salem town, which is Salem today. And in this courthouse in 1692, the trial of Rebecca Nurse is about to begin. She's 71 years of age, deaf in at least one ear, arthritic, frail, but she seems to be unshaken. What I'm going to try to give you right now is not speculation. I'm going to try to give you actual lines from the court transcripts. This is what the courtroom heard that day, or at least in part. Can't give you everything, but at least in part. If you visit Salem, The Dungeon Museum, in many cases, kind of reenact think of Rebecca Nurse's trial. They may reenact other trials where they have some manuscripts of what was actually said. You have one of the girls, her voice is high-pitched. She's frantic. Because remember, many of these accusations come from young women, young girls. She yells out something like, "She pinched me in the night. Her spirit flies through the air and chokes me when I sleep. She brought the book to me. She said, 'Sign it or be struck dumb.'" Now remember, when they say she brought the book, or she pinched me in the night, or her spirit flies through the air and chokes me when I sleep, the girls are using what is known as spectral evidence. Rebecca Nurse could be home in bed or be in another state, but the girls could say it was her spirit. And this is known as spectral evidence. And the Puritans allowed this at this time. And the courts allowed this. Now, while these girls are making these accusations, and they're high-pitched, frantic, weeping, very emotional, and very dramatic, Rebecca just sat silently as the girls contorted and screamed and fell to the floor in fits. Rebecca just sat there, not saying anything. "Abigail Williams, what do you say against this woman?" "Goodly nurse, she doth torment me. She picks me with pins." The judge turns to Rebecca. She's calm, somewhat confused. And she says, "I am innocent as the child unborn. I have not wronged any in thought or deed." The judge, very stern, "Why did these afflicted persons cry out upon you? What contact have you had with the devil?" Rebecca Nurse, "O Lord, help me. It is false. I never hurt no child." The crowd begins to murmur. But something remarkable kind of starts to happen as the crowd is murmuring. Because during the questioning, Rebecca Nurse's composure, she stays calm. That famous line, "I am innocent as the child unborn. I have not wronged any in thought or deed." She begins to sway them. Even the judges are now uncertain. The jury returns. We find Rebecca Nurse not guilty. But then chaos erupts. The accusers erupt. They begin to scream out, fall on the floor. And that Rebecca had bewitched a girl after the trial began. Now new accusations start happening. She's laughing. She laughs in Satan's name. The judge tries to calm everything out, and the judge asks the jury to reconsider. So the jury leaves to reconsider. They come back. We find Rebecca Nurse guilty. What? You just found her innocent. And then they go back and just minutes later change the verdict because someone starts crying out, she's laughing in Satan's name. She afflicted another girl since the trial began, and just start making wild accusations. No tangible evidence, no actual evidence, just accusations. The idea of her spirit. They literally said she was innocent, and they come back almost minutes later and said, that's it, we've changed our mind. She's guilty because of fear, because of panic, because of paranoia. And so the sentence is read. Rebecca Nurse, you are sentenced to die by hanging. The righteous is being condemned. The children of the town are somehow called or seen as being prophets. And Rebecca Nurse, a faithful church member, a grandmother, was now to hang. July the 19th, 1692. Rebecca Nurse, Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Samantha Martin, and Sarah Wilds are carted from the jail to Gallows Hill. The road was hot and dusty. The cart rattled over the stones. Witnesses said the women sang psalms, according to some. And some say, there's some dispute over this, that just as they were placing the noose around Rebecca's neck, she once again stated, I am as innocent as the child unborn. And right as she said that, the trap door opens, her body drops, and she is killed by hanging. Now, I have stood right at the foot of the hill where the women were hung. I have stood there. I have walked and touched all of the memorial stones right there. I have stood there. I have pictures from it. I have touched the memorial stone of Rebecca Nurse at the place where she was hung, and at the oldest cemetery, like in all of that area there in Salem. There's a memorial set up right next to the graveyard. Now, she's not buried in that graveyard. None of them are buried in that graveyard because their bodies were just thrown there at the foot of what we call Gallows Hill. Some say Proctor's Ledge. There was dispute on where the location was. Now we are pretty certain where it is, and now there's a memorial there. I have stood there where this occurred. Now, after her death, her body was just dumped in a shallow grave beneath the gallows with the others. They just tossed the bodies there. Because they're witches, right? So they're not allowed to have a good Christian burial. They're not allowed to be buried in the graveyard with, the other godly people, because these women are witches. But that night, under the cover of darkness, her family came with a cart and quietly carried her home. They buried her in the garden right here in Danvers, where I pulled the car over and we're all standing right now. Right there in Danvers. They brought her back to Salem Village. Now, a simple filled stone marked the spot. For years, no one dare speak her name. There was nothing there, just a filled stone for a very long time. Now, about 5 years after her murder, Salem begins to kind of repent. The court disavowed spectral evidence. Ministers, in some cases, fasted and mourned. But it was nearly 20 years before the church would restore her membership after her death. It took them 20 years after the fact to go, okay, well, we'll make her a member again. Well, congratulations. 20 years after the fact, we're going to make her a member again. You killed her. But okay, let's make her a member again. The vote was read aloud. The church doth own that it was too hasty and uncharitable in casting her out. We do now reverse that act. They could not bring her back, but I guess they could confess their sin 20 years after the fact. Years passed. Salem was quieter now, but it wasn't at peace. The town carried the ghost that would not be dismissed. Families avoided one another in the meeting house. Empty chairs lingered, showing that this person is gone. They were murdered. They were killed. 14 years after the gallows fell silent, around 1706, the Reverend Joseph Green of Salem Village stood before his congregation as a young woman rose from her pew. Her name was Ann Putnam Jr., the child who at 12 years of age had pointed her finger at Rebecca Nurse. Her voice trembled as she read from a prepared statement. She read these words: I desire to be humbled before God for that sad and humbling providence that befell my father's family in the year 1692. I confess that I was deluded by Satan and that I have been the chief instrument of accusing good people. I acknowledge before God and the world that Rebecca Nurse and others were innocent persons and that I have caused the shedding of innocent blood. She actually named Rebecca Nurse as one of the innocent people she accused. A little late now, but at least she acknowledged it. Nobody else apologizes. Nobody else. She's the only one who actually stands up and says, hey, what I did was wrong. She blames Satan. You know, we could have that whole discussion. But the congregation wept. It was the first public confession by any of the accusers. And at that single moment, the righteous name of Rebecca Nurse was restored in the eyes of the village she had once called home. Now, the death of Rebecca Nurse had already begun to change hearts long before this confession of false accusation. Rebecca's gentle reputation and the shock of her execution really struck fear in the citizens of Massachusetts. I mean, her death really was a major turning point. Even those who had defended the court now kind of wondered how a 71-year-old grandmother, deaf, devout Puritan, good Christian woman could have been a witch. One woman in particular was moved, Mary Spencer Phipps. She happened to be the governor's wife, Governor William Phipps. She had known Rebecca's family, and when the hangings continued after Rebecca's death, Mary Phipps pleaded with her husband that the court had gone mad. Now, within weeks, the governor dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer. the tribunal that had condemned Rebecca Nurse, and ordered that spectral evidence no longer be accepted. Now, some say the reason the governor ultimately changes this is because his wife is accused of being a witch, because she's the one trying to stop it. And well, if you tried to stop it, well, lo and behold, someone would accuse you of being a witch. Either way, some say Rebecca Nurse's murder was a major turning point in all of this. You could argue that Rebecca Nurse's death, more than any of the others, began to open the eyes of those who had been blinded by their zeal, their fear, and their paranoia. In 1711, the Massachusetts General Court reversed the convictions of Rebecca Nurse and others, granting compensation for their families. But no decree could erase the memory of that summer of 1692. A child's confession, a governor's remorse, a community shame, all grew from the grave of one woman who never yielded to a lie, would not confess a lie, and would not accept the accusations against her. Even though she was 71 years of age, she could have just said, you know what, I'm a witch. And she could have played the game in a way to be able to survive, but she did not. Salem's horror is not ghosts or curses. It's that a community convinced of its righteousness could turn around and destroy the righteous among themselves. Rebecca Nurse was not a symbol of evil. She was a mirror showing what fear does when it wears the mask of holiness. And that's the haunting truth that still clings to the field standing there by Rebecca. If you go to Rebecca Nurse's homestead and you stand there looking at those fields, that's what's haunting about it. Rebecca Nurse's story does not end in 1692. Definitely not in memory. And perhaps not even entirely in silence, depending on the stories you hear walking around Salem or visiting some of these sites. You see, at the edge of her family's land, visitors sometimes speak of hearing soft weeping on still nights. Some say the sound comes from the pine grove behind the home. Others hear it near the crude family cemetery where the grass bends towards the broken monument. A few have reported the creaking of a rope swinging from no tree, or whispers under the area where the meeting house was, where her name was once condemned. The meeting house is not there, but there's a marker there marking where the meeting house was. And I think they may have built a restored, or kind of a replica meeting house there at the Rebecca Nurse homestead. Whether these are echoes of trauma or tricks of the wind that carry something real, not a ghost, but the unshakable weight of injustice echoing throughout the centuries. You see, when injustice is sanctified in the name of God, its consequences outlive even the executioner. When injustice is sanctified in the name of God, the consequences outlive even the executioner, and the memory should haunt us. And maybe in a sense, the soul of Salem still weeps because of it. Now, as the night falls, I find myself standing before the Nurse family cemetery. There's a granite monument that kind of rises out of the dark. You can read the inscription. You can go there yourself and see it. Rebecca Nurse, Yarmouth, England, 1621. Salem Village, Mass, 1692. The inscription reads, "O Christian martyr, who for truth could die when all about thee owned the hideous lie. The world redeemed from superstition's sway is breathing freer for thy sake today." The wind moves through the trees. I can't speak for you. When I'm standing there, I think of a woman who stood firm when everyone around her was screaming for fear and for blood. And I whisper the only words that I think that fits that place. And if you've ever been to Salem, if you've ever been to any of the memorials, you know for those of us who are greatly impacted by the Salem witch trials, we have a tendency to bring a journal. We will open the journal. We will tear out a piece of paper. We will grab a pen or pencil and we write something. We lay it on the monument. And then sometimes we'll take seashells. Salem's right there by the ocean. We'll place them on both sides of the paper to leave it there. Now, whenever I go to Salem and I see the memorial stones, I will always put the papers back and I try to clean them off and I try to make sure that the papers are seen, because these are words that people write from their heart about their emotions and their feelings, about maybe a specific individual that they're drawn to by studying the Salem witch trials. So I tear a piece of paper from my journal and I wrote these words: "Rest now, Rebecca. The gallows are gone. The garden remains." I would hope that the church, that the Puritans of today would not hang the innocent in the name of God. But I know the church will always fall short, because those we accuse, those we condemn, those we hang, and maybe not in a physical way, they're sinners, and the ones doing the hanging, and the ones doing the accusing, and the ones doing the condemning, they are sinners. I'm just glad Rebecca Nurse wouldn't give in to the religious mob. I'm glad she wouldn't bow the knee, plead guilty to try to live. I'm glad she stood against them, because in some ways her death ultimately stopped the madness in many ways. Now, we could argue historically, was it her death? Her death was a major turning point, and there's no way about it. 71-year-old grandmother, midwife, church member. She wasn't of questionable character like some of the other women who were condemned and accused. No, she was one of them, One day she's sitting in the pew. Next day she's hanging from a rope. That's the story of Rebecca Nurse. Godly to a witch, all because of accusations, all because of paranoia, all because of fear, and all done in the name of God. Thanks for listening. God bless.